I'm one of the many Jims. I'm known as Jim H, or Jim, or Hey You. Daniel asked me to give a talk about something about segmenting. And so I'm going to talk about something about segmenting. And I kept adding things. I hope it doesn't get too long. But hopefully we'll have some fun with this. So I call this Design of a Segmented Vessel, Greek Key Feature, and Accent Rings. I've always been fascinated by the Greek key, which is that looks like a 6 and a 9 to me. That's repeated on that middle ring there in the picture. And I had made a couple of attempts at it and didn't get beyond the prototype phase and set it aside. And I kind of struggled with it for a while. So my inspiration has been a couple of books. This one, Woodturning with Ray Allen. It's a phenomenal book, and it's got all kinds of designs of different vessels. And this one is that I'm going to lead up to is my segmented bowl number 57. And if you look at all the ones that I've done over the years, an awful lot of them kind of came out of here with some adaptation. Ray Allen did a lot of Greek key vessels, and there are a number of examples on here, and I've marked them, and we can pass it around, and you can look at that. The other book that I got a lot of more how-to information is this Art of Segmented Wood Turning by what Chris and I call the godfather of segmenting, Malcolm Tibbetts. And this is more of a how-to book. It has some really detailed directions on how to build a couple of different bowls, including the Indian blanket design. And this is, I don't know, it'll be number 60 or something. I'll get to it. I've done a number of these and I kind of got bored with them, and so this one's been built and been sitting around in the garage for quite a while. But there is a example of exactly what I'm doing tonight is the Greek key. And one of the things that was always kind of intimidated me was his caption under this picture, which is, accurate, tight glue lines are achieved by disc sanding. And anytime I've tried to do disc sanding, I ended up with pieces that were a lot smaller than I wanted them to be. So I was never very successful with that. This is in the Ray Allen book. It's like page 139 or something. Is a step-by-step example of how Ray Allen did this particular design, and he cut pieces and he shaped them with the sander, and like I said, I find that kind of intimidating. You can also get inspiration from Southwest Pottery, and we own quite a bit, and we've seen galleries and stuff, and I've taken pictures of things and brought them home, and so there's lots of examples. So the process always begins with a sketch of the vessel, and this actually is in my notebook. I'm taking notes all the time. I'm in volume 5. But that was the concept. What I was thinking of was I'm going to have a Greek key thingamabob in the middle, and an accent at the bottom, and an accent at the top, and they're going to look like something pointing up and something pointing down. Now, I did make drawings in my book, and they're repeated up here. I stick those kind of things in my book, and I can refer back to them. And by doing it in this way, I can count squares to see how big each piece that I need to cut is, and that was really important. If you take the my picture away for a minute, you'll see the accent piece and the design I was working with, and the one on the left is the feature ring and the design I was working with. The other thing that I always start with is consultation with my color designer. And we settled on, I wanted really good contrast between the pieces that were in the feature ring, so I wanted something that was very light and something very dark. I happened to have a piece of ambrosia maple that didn't have a lot of the ambrosia figure, and it was about as wide a piece of maple that I had laying around in the shop. So that's how I ended up with ambrosia maple. Peruvian walnut, something I just discovered. It's wonderful to work with. It is. It turns very easily. It's dark, and when you apply finish to it, it gets almost black. But probably the best thing about it is that it's uniform in color. So walnut, like the pastor's bed here, a lot of times will have lighter areas and darker areas, and if you cut up a board and you use quite a bit in segmenting, and you start at one end and it looks like you're going to get through it all and it'll be uniform in color, and at the very end you're into that sapwood and it's light. But I haven't run into a piece of the Peruvian walnut that wasn't black from one end to the other, or really dark brown from one end to the other. Chris, a couple years ago, gave me he made me buy it. He made me buy it. Some pieces of spalted pecan that I've been saving for a rainy day, and this wood is phenomenal. I meant to bring a piece of it tonight, but I forgot it. So we'll have to just be settled with the picture. That's this portion right here. And it in the bowl that I'll show at the end, it adds just so much character to it because it's got all this stuff going on in that piece of wood. It was probably 2 inches thick, so it's 8/4 or so, and so I sliced it up as many ways as I could to preserve as much of that. And I probably got enough to maybe do 2 more bowls before it's all gone. The other thing I had to do, it's full of bug holes, and so I had to examine every piece every wedgie that I made to make sure that I didn't have a bug hole in the piece. So when I cut them, I always, and this is a 16 segment vessel I'm building, I always would make 1 or 2 more in case something was wrong. Well, I did 4 or 5 more this time because there were so many problems. And then just to have a little more color and to learn how to do something new, we decided to, with my color consultant's help, we decided to add some green veneer in a couple of places in the vessel. I should have asked this question before. How many people here have done segmenting? How many have done segmenting? You have. There's a few. So in segmenting, the things you need to know is what is the outside diameter, what is the inside diameter, what is the thickness of the piece this way, what is the segment edge length, which is this one, that controls the diameter of the piece that you're making. And so I just wanted you to see what those definitions are, and it was a pretty good drawing. The miter angle, she's telling me, is 360 divided by the number of segments divided by 2. And that's the angle that you're going to cut the wedges at. By the way, if you have any questions, I would love to try to see if anybody can stump me. I'm sure you can. Yes?
How many sheets of plywood do you go through before you make your first cut on a good piece of wood?
0. I use a wedgie sled, and the wedgie sled is very well calibrated. And a friend, and another thing that I've done is a friend has a CNC machine, and he made me a set of wedgies for 10 segments to 48 segments or something, and those things are dead on. And I put them between the two arms of the wedgie sled, and I don't have to worry about it. I cut the.
So you have wedges for compound angles too?
I haven't done compound angles. I did one. It sits on Debbie's desk, and it was such a pain to glue up that I haven't done any more like that. One, probably the best known application, computer application for segmenting is Segment Pro. And that was developed by Lloyd Johnson. And I meant to look up when he did it. It was quite a while ago. I bought my copy about 5 years ago. It's had 2 minor updates in almost the first month that I had it, and there hasn't been a single update since. And he has lost his programmer, so there will be no future updates of the program. However, when I first installed it, I was running Windows 7, then I was running Windows 8, and then I was running, was there a 9? They're going to 10 immediately. So it runs under Windows 10, and now I'm running Windows 11, and it runs under Windows 11. So I hope it'll continue to run. The product, I think I paid more than that. Segment Pro is $79. And there's a companion program called Woodturner Pro, and it's $79. But you can buy a suite of programs for $139. They give you 2 additional programs that I don't think are worth a whole lot. But one is Lamination Pro and one is 3D Designer Pro. But 139 is less than 79 plus 79. So the programs are pretty useful, and but they won't be updated, so there's some danger that when you purchase it, that some release of Windows that it will not continue to run. First of all, when I'm designing a vessel, I do it one of 3 ways. I start with Segment Pro, I start with Woodturner Pro, or I start with paper. And depending on the complexity of the vessel. And since I'm lazy and like the computer to do the calculations for me, I generally use one of the 2 programs as a starting point. Segment Pro will give you a pleasing shape of the vessel in almost no time. It'll give you the overall dimensions of the vessel, but refinement is a problem because Segment Pro wants every ring to be the same thickness, every ring to be composed of equal number of segments per ring, and what it calculates for an inside and outside diameter is what you're going to get, and you can't adjust that. So those are the limitations that I find are problematic for me. I recorded a 10-minute video on how Segment Pro works. Okay, here's a quick demo of the program called Segment Pro. There are 2 ways to create a vessel. The first is to just do an ad hoc design of what you want to create. And to do that, in this profile view, you use your mouse to select points. And as you can see, I can start to build a vessel shape. And It says using fewer points is better. Once you have closed a half loop, it gives you an isometric view of the bowl that you created. Now you can go in and edit that design. So maybe I want a little longer neck with a little curvature, and you can see the effect almost immediately. Now, the height of the vessel by default is 10 inches, and you can change that to 9 or 12, for example. By default, it's in what is called the painted segment mode. There is an option called feature ring, which will put a default feature ring. You can't really edit that. That's just an indication of what it would look like. And or you can make a tornado bowl, which looks like that. I usually leave it at feature ring. The bowl summary, it's 12 inches high and the max diameter is 17. That's a pretty big bowl. Maybe I want it to be 15 inches. So, okay, I can get it to 14.81. And you can see how that changes the shape. That neck looks a little funny, so I might want to shorten that like that. And maybe that's a little more pleasing. You also have an idea of what the rows will look like. And you can shows the wall width is 3/8 of an inch. I find that's a little bit small. I'd rather make it a little bigger and use my wood turning tools to thin it out later. It kind of making it thicker kind of covers up for any design problems that you might have had in your shape. There are 3 modes here. There's a novice mode, and in the novice mode it just does 12 segments. In the intermediate, and I do that a lot, at least for a starting point, that's 16 segments. And it also, you notice in the novice, the row thickness is 3/4 of an inch, and the wall width is 5/8, I guess. Intermediate, we go to 16, and a row thickness of a half, and a wall thickness of a half. And if we go to advanced, we get 24, 3/8 of an inch thick, and both in the row and the wall. Let's leave it at intermediate. In the summary view, this is what you would print out to start cutting the boards to make your bowl. Row 1 is the base. Row 22 is the top ring. The other way you can use this software, and I'm going to reset, is to import a picture. So you click the plus or minus image, click open, browse to a picture that you've saved, and click open. Now Segment Pro likes to use half a vessel. So the first thing we're going to do is crop it to get half the vessel. There's 2 chairs up here. And there we go. And there. Maybe I'll make it a little bit wider. Then I'll say crop and save. And here's my bowl template. And I'll go in here like before and just click with the mouse and trace around that shape. Again, they recommend not going too crazy. Just let the software do its thing. And when you get to the bottom, it builds a vessel, just like before. 10 inches, maximum diameter of 5. Maybe I want that to be a little bit fatter. Maybe something like that. Here's your profile. I'm going to do a feature ring intermediate bowl. And I want to do, say, an inch wall thickness. And that's a little more turning, but it gives you an opportunity to correct the shape as you're going if you need to. Now that we've got our bowl shape in, we can go to the summary view, and here is my cut list for making the bowl. And one of the things I always do is I export the image, the design. Export it to, it exports to Excel. Choose a file name. Test, and we're going to put it in just the root directory of documents and save it. Now that I've got it in Excel, I can rearrange the columns. I can, I like to highlight the board width because I'm going to use that to cut the boards that I'm going to use to build the vessel. And I highlight the segment edge length. Should have made the board width a little bit darker. And I usually highlight the feature ring just for fun. You can see that this vessel has 19 rows and 280 segments. So that's a quick view of Segment Pro. I forgot to hand out some of the different things that I've done with feature rings, and so you can actually touch the facets that I built. There's just a bunch of interesting collections of wood.
So, how long from idea through design through cut list, glue up?
There was one, get that question asked a lot, and there was one bowl that I started, and every time I worked on it, I wrote down the starting time and the ending time. And it added it all up in the end, and it was 39 and a half hours. So I have never done it again. That was too much work. So if you ask me the question, I'd say about 40 hours of actual working time. This one that I'm doing now, I had several more opportunities to learn things as I went into it. I also had some distractions with my grandson's baseball and SWAT and other things going on. So I've actually probably worked on this one for, I've been sending Chris updates probably for 3 months at least. But a lot of times I wasn't working on it at all. So I probably have maybe 60 hours in this particular bowl.
Are you doing these little pieces on CNC?
No, not yet. I just bought a CNC machine and all that. I would say generally it's too slow to be useful. I'm going to make things faster with my table saw and my bandsaw. But there may be things that I can do in terms of tools, or maybe some minor embellishment in different aspects of it. But I'm not going to cut wedges with the CNC. I'll take something that takes 5 minutes and turn it into 3 hours. So no, thank you. So after I've got the design, and I think I know what the feature ring is going to look like, I go ahead and build the feature ring. I want to know, like that one that got passed around, I want to know that it's 10 inches or 10.2 inches. I want to know that it's in diameter. I want to know what the ID of it actually is. And it'll be pretty close to what I designed, but it might be off 1/8 of an inch, or it might be off a 1/2 an inch. One time I did build a vessel and I didn't do that measurement, assumed it would be right, and guess what? There was a little difference, and it made it a little bit more difficult to get it to fare in. I got it done, but it made me wish I had done a last-minute adaptation to my design to account for a feature ring that didn't turn out to be exactly what I thought it was. Now, I told you that I've been fascinated with Greek keys for a long time, and I had a number of problems in getting my prototypes to work. And I found out that the secret to making a Greek feature key is to make the boards, all of them, cut them at the same time, make them all the same thickness. You know what that thickness is. And then the length of the pieces need to be an integer multiple of that thickness. So what does that mean? It means 2 times or 3 times or 4 times. And I get that by looking at that plan that I had with the little blocks that I had laid out, and I count. Well, that one needs to be 4 wide. So I set it up to be 4 wide. And my first attempts at doing that were just on the table saw, and different things happen. One, it's a little bit hard to set the length because I was measuring the thickness of the piece and then measuring how long that piece needed to be. And set my stop up, and I cut all those pieces that maybe were 4 units long. And then I go to a 3 one, and I want to cut the 3s, and they'd turn out to be 3 and a skosh, or 3 and less a skosh. Skosh is about that much. I don't really look at YouTube videos very much. I'd rather, for some reason, I'd rather look at a book. But I decided there's got to be a better way to doing it, and I poked around and I found Steve Lindsay's website, and the light bulb came on. And he designed a sled, and I'll pass this around, that allowed me to set the length that I want, and have a video of that, and we'll look at it in a minute. But it's a stop block or block. Oh, and the other thing, when I was cutting them the other way, I cut a piece and it ended up over there. And I cut a piece and it ended up over there. And so I cut 16 pieces, and maybe I could find 14. This stop block holds the piece down, so it doesn't go anywhere. And I found I can cut, I think, up to 4 at a time, 4 thicknesses at once. The length is set by this piece, and just a simple sled. and and this is maybe a sample piece that I'm cutting, and it goes under there. This you'll see in the video is how I set the length of the piece. Don't lose this. This is golden because it's exactly with the tape, exactly just about exactly the thickness of the kerf of the saw blade. Oh, there's no audio in this video, so I have to talk. So I put that little magic piece that's exactly the thickness of the kerf in the kerf there, and I'm counting out 8 boards, so that's 8 thicknesses, 8 units. I put it up against the magic piece of wood. There's my stop, and I clamp it. Get it all nice and tight. Then I can pull those pieces out, and anything I cut will be exactly 8 units wide. And those were the top and bottom of the feature ring, was 8 units wide. So here I'm putting a piece of that ambrosia maple with, in this case I only did one, and I put that little cut block in, close the clamp, and now I can cut it. And that piece is going to be exactly 8 units wide. And I take that piece out, slide it in, put the thing back on. The next piece is going to be exactly 8 units wide. And if you don't get them all the same width, when you go to glue it together, you're going to have a gap somewhere. And I'm trying to avoid that gap. So now I've cut 1 billion of these things, and all these cups are 4 units wide, 3 units wide, 8 units wide, 8 units wide, and so on. And pull them all out, and I'm going to glue them together. I use Tight Bond 2, and we had an introduction to Tight Bond 2 by the chemist that supports that product, and we talked about whether it's important to paint the glue on both sides of the wood or on just one side, and he said either is fine. So in the interest of time, I only painted one side. Keep in mind I had to do 16 plus 16 plus 16 of these with a few extra for spare, so it took a little while to assemble these guys. And now I get into the little small ones. That one's probably 2 units wide with a 4 unit in the middle, I think.
Would you choose 2 instead of original for the work time, or?
I had plenty of time to put these things together, and I'm in an air-conditioned shop. It's probably 76 or 77 in the shop, and I didn't have any trouble with getting them together.
Did you just want the working time of Type On 2, or you just liked its characteristics, or?
Well, I've got this 5-gallon bucket of it, and no, I just like the way it works. I've had some 24 segment pieces where I'm building a ring out of 24 wedges, and once in a while the first piece, if I didn't have it aligned just right, I wished I'd had a little more working time. I've used Type Bond 3. It gives you a little bit of a gray line if things don't fit together just absolutely perfectly. You might see a seam, and I don't have it with this one. And then I clamp it together. Maybe overkill on the clamping. I think I used 3 clamps.
I couldn't hear her.
Oh, what's this thing?
And later on, I found out that if I raised the jig up, uh, by the way, the jig is two pieces of MDF, a narrow one and a wide one, and they're just glued together. That one took 4 minutes to make.
So you can do a whole bunch of them in one.
Really, only on that one jig, I would do one at the left edge and one at the right edge. I only did two at a time. I let them sit for generally an hour because I've got other things going on in the shop. But I think 15 to 20 minutes is long enough. You could disassemble it and do another one. So what I'm doing here is I'm cutting the wedges, and my fingers are really close to that blade. So you'll see that I'm being slow in thinking about it. And I'm cutting the angle that's necessary. I think it was, what is it, 11 and a half? Math major. And then you have to turn it over and cut the same thing on the other side. So as you're cutting, that piece keeps getting smaller.
I will say that this is a saw stop.
So when I got all done with this assembly, here's on the left is the assembled pieces for their beauty shot, and on the other side were the rings that I assembled from them.
The one on the left already has the angle for the rings?
No, I have not. At that point, they're rectangular. So the rings are built, and I can measure the dimensions, the OD, outer diameter, the inner diameter, the ring thickness, and the ring height. But like I said, there's no way to input, to get those exact things into Segment Pro. So you can transfer them to Woodturner Pro, and that is, simplifies the statement. It's much more difficult than that. But I wanted you to get a sense of Woodturner Pro and how flexible it is, even though the interface is not as nice as Segment Pro. Now I'd like to show you how to use Woodturner Pro to build a vessel. Woodturner Pro is an older style Windows application. It doesn't have some of the nice features that are in Segment Pro, but what it does have is the ability to customize just about anything. So let's start by selecting a walnut base, and this says it's going to be 1/2 inch thick and 4 inches in diameter, and that's fine to start. Let's add a new row. And this new row we're going to say is going to be a accent ring, and so I'm going to pick a different color, a different kind of wood, like bobinga, just to indicate that it's different than walnut. Now, my accent pieces were 0.81 inches tall, so I can enter 0.81. Although it's going to convert it immediately to a fraction. And we're going to call it 4.75 in diameter. And the ID is about 3.2. Okay. You see that converted to 3.16. Now we want to add another row. We also wanted to make that a 16 segment row. Now when we say new row, it will assume the same wood type and assumes a increase in diameter, and we'll just let it do that. But we want the thickness to be 0.66. That's based on my design.
And
the base material is going to be pecan. There we go. Now that's row 3. I need through row 8 to be pecan, and I'm just going to add them. This is going to be row 4, row 5, row 6, row 7, and row 8. Notice it's continuing to increase the diameter, and we can adjust that later. The next one's going to be the feature ring. So I'm going to create a new row. I'm going to change it to Bubinga so we know that it's a special row. And this one is going to be 1.28 tall. And the outside diameter is going to be 713. Notice that the automatic increases in diameter overestimated how fast the bowl is going to grow, and we'll adjust that in a minute. And the ID of that is about 5.5. And now we're ready to add 2 more pecan rows, so I'm going to do a new row. And since the diameter between row 8 and row 9 decreased, it assumes that all future rings will decrease. So this pecan row, we need to change it to pecan. And we need to get back to the 0.66 thickness. And now we want 1 more row. Again, decrease the diameter. Now the next ring is another special ring. It's going to be the top accent ring. And for indication, we're going to make that Bubinga. It needs to be 0.81 inches high. And the outside diameter needs to be 6.19. And the inside diameter is 4.38. No, that's pretty funky looking, but we'll work on fixing it. The other thing I want to do now is I want to view the wall profile, which is going to look pretty odd. And I'm going to start with this row. If you double click, you get the whole row highlighted. And I'm going to decrease the OD, just the arrow key. And that one needs to be just a little bit inside. Now it's got the crosshatch there, which means that the inside diameter is greater than the outside diameter. So now I need to do Control and the right key, and now I can start to bring the inside diameter down. But let's just look at the outside diameter for a minute, and we'll just keep going down, and we'll keep decreasing it a little bit. And we'll go here, and we'll grow that one to about there, and we'll grow that one to about there. Oh, I forgot, I've got one more row to do, and that new row is a walnut row. It's the top ring. And it's 0.66 tall. So now we're starting to have a nice outside shape. But we need to work on the inside diameter. And we kind of work through it until we get all of. So now we have a vessel that we could build from this. Maybe I want to add a ring above this. Let's do a new row. Let's change it to walnut. This will be like an accent row. And I want it to be maybe 1/8 of an inch tall. This time I'll enter as a fraction. And you can either make it a little bit smaller or you can leave it the same size since it's going to be almost married to the feature ring. And I select that and add another new row. Make it walnut. Make it 1/8 of an inch tall. And that's how you use Woodturner Pro to build a vessel, very much like we did with Segment Pro, but as you can see, it was not near as automatic. And you can view things like the golden ratio, and see I've got it at the right place on the vessel. That was by design. So now that we have a completed vessel, let's look at some of the other options in the program. If I click here on this vessel, I will see the vessel view that we've been looking at. If I click here, I will see only the profile. You can see the different wood types. You can see the thicknesses of them, and actually here we can kind of see that maybe we might want to, before we create the vessel, we might want to change the dimensions of this accent ring that's below the feature ring. So now that we've got the vessel designed, we want to be able to print out the cut list so we know how long our boards need to be, what the width of them is, and what the segment edge length is.
What is the golden ratio on this particular?
It's 2/3 of the height. So the vessel is almost 10 inches, so it's 2/3 of 10. And the only thing I cut out there was how you print out the cut list, and it's pretty much this like it was in Segment Pro. Now I import it to Excel and I do a little modification of it, and I get something like that, and I can do a little bit of arithmetic on it, like I can count the number of rows and the number of segments and what the height of the vessel is. It was 9.34 by design, and the max diameter is 7.13, and I can look at the height over the diameter ratio. And that goes in my book. And when I'm cutting pieces on the saw stop, I have my book there, not the computer. So I highlight the rows that are important for the cutting, and it looks like that. And I'd like it to look pretty, so I spent a little bit of time with it in Excel. Remember, we had the green veneer that I wanted to add to the vessel, and I wanted to put that above and below the feature ring, and above and below the accent rings. The veneer I use is dyed maple, and you buy a pack of it from Woodcraft, and you get a whole bunch of different colors of green. You get one that's the color I wanted, so I had to buy 3 packages. So anybody that needs some light green, a yellow green, I got at least 3 sheets of that. I decided to build the veneer rings with 8 segments because I thought it was going to be easier to do than 16, and I was probably right. But that means that there will be some areas where you don't have the ring in view when you assemble it, but by the time you turn it down, you'll have the complete ring. Debbie, can you do camera 2? It's kind of amazing to me that you can build these things, and they're that thick, and they hold together with just a touch of Type Bond 2. And I always do prototypes, so I started with something I had a lot of, and that's brown wood. But they look like they'd be pretty fragile, but they're really quite strong. So I made the assemblies with 4 pieces of veneer, and I made a little sandwich with 1/4 inch MDF. And this might be overkill, and you'll see why I did this in a minute. But this holds them together real nice and tight, and then I can cut them on my saw for the angle that's appropriate for an 8-segment vessel. And the blue painter's tape goes on easy, and it comes off real easy, so it's a good choice there. So I needed to cut them with a certain angle. In the first attempt that we did it on the chop saw, and I have my chop saw operator cut it for me because I'm left-handed, and chop saws everything's on the wrong side. So Debbie does most of my cutting on the chop saw, and it pulled all the fibers out. That was an awful failure, and one of the reasons why I had to go back to Woodcraft and buy another package of green veneer. I spent a little time on the Segmented Turners forum, and I posted my question here, and I got an answer from Jerry Bennett, and he said that the reason that came out was because of the angle the chop saw cuts into this is more horizontal than vertical, and that I would be better off cutting it on the table saw. And I thought, well, that was dumb. I've got this great wedgie sled. Why did I go to a chop saw instead of using my wedgie sled that I'm really familiar with? So the one on the right is one of the ones that came out, and here's some that I'll be able to make rings out of. It was very successful. Probably overkill to put the, Jerry says it's overkill to put the 1/4 inch MDF, but that's so cheap, and the veneer is expensive. So I'd rather spend a little money on the MDF and not have to worry about making another trip to get some expensive. I think it's $25 for a pack of veneer. You know, only get one sheet out of it. To answer your question, Nick, I have a very short video. I think 6 minutes. I thought it was short. So I'm using my sled to cut, and I have a sandwich of veneer that's as long as the veneer, so it's 8.5. I think it's 8.5 inches long, and I can keep my fingers away from the blade with this. And I'm always pretty deliberate on these, so it seems pretty slow. That's because I like my fingers. And now I've got the components that I need to build 2 rings, because each sandwich has 4 pieces of veneer. I'm making an 8 segment veneer, so I need 2 of those pieces for each ring. Probably should have cut this off, but this is what I have to do to peel off the painter's tape, open the sandwich, and get the veneer out. The prized piece of veneer. Now, underneath my hand is the first segment of the 8, and I've got it taped down. And I'm going to start adding segments. And I got all these little strips that are left over from the sandwich, and I build a ring. And I'm going to speed it up here in just a little bit. And then this I had to do 2, 4, 6, 8 times to get the rings that I needed. And if somebody's got a better idea than what I came up for gluing it, you'll see in a minute. I'd like to know what that is. Probably would have been better to have made 16 segment pieces, and then they would have fit exactly with my rings. But the way I was doing this to get the glue on the 8 pieces meant that I was folding that assembly to expose the joint and putting the glue on that, and then going to another diagonal and folding it. And I think with 16 pieces that might be a little awkward. Maybe not. I haven't tried it. So I'm putting some glue. I have a bunch of these sheets of plywood that's got a thin sheet of plexiglass on top of it, and I find that's a really nice gluing platform. So I can get a wet paper towel and wipe the glue off and reuse it. I have about 6 of those that I use. It's also a good place to put your rings when they're drying. So now I got the glue on that, and then I fold it a different way and put the glue on that. I don't think I only showed you 2 of them. And now so it can dry, I got to pin it down so that the assembly will dry flat. And so I put a little piece of tape on each segment. And if it buckles in the middle, I might put a couple in the middle. Now, this is Malcolm Tibbetts' invention. It's his centering ring. And so I've got the accent ring, and it's sitting on here, and I've got these different colors, and I can look down on it and see where it's aligned. And when I get it that way, I know it's really close to being centered. I'm getting ready to make some more of these, because this one's been well used and loved, and I am going to build the new one on the CNC machine. So once I got the ring down, I hold it in place with the clamps, and so it doesn't move. Don't ask me why I decided to do that, because I got some rings that wandered a little bit on me. And then I use hot glue to hold it in place. Use my Type Bond to get a good layer on the ring, and use my expensive spreading tool to get the glue spread out. And probably put in a little more glue than I normally do, because I haven't done much with veneer, and I want to make sure that it's stuck together. So I use quite a bit of glue. And you can see that there are some places where you can see the ring inside and outside of the veneer piece, and that's because one is 8 segments and one is 16 segments, and they're not going to match up exactly. But when I turn it down, I'm turning it down from the outside and from the inside, and I'm going to leave a layer that's fully exposed with the veneer. And again, I'm putting quite a bit on there. I think I did 2 applications, and got lots of glue. And I do all my assembly on the lathe. The faceplate fits on a 60-degree cone real well. The one I'm going to make, I'm just going to have a hole in the middle of the plywood, a 1/4 inch. I don't need the faceplate. And there it is from a different view, and from the other side, I think, in a minute. Oh, and this is with the first piece of pecan. And the second, so you see 2 pieces of veneer. From here, I would add the other 6 rings of pecan one at a time. And when I get to the accent, the feature ring, I would add 2 more layers of veneer and continue to build it up. Yep.
So I know that you alternate where the seams are. So the one that was only 8, did that cause a trouble with that or not?
You don't see it.
I understand what you meant. Once you get it laid down, if you didn't align it, it's really hard to move. And I don't think you can see where the seam is. He's talking about the brick lay between rings. Normally we want the seam from one layer to be halfway between the seam for the next layer, and the third ring would line up with the seam on the first ring. You're probably a purist would say that I didn't align the veneer in the correct fashion, but I think it turned out pretty good. Gordon, Chris wanted to know if I took care in aligning the veneer layer so that the veneer seams would match would be an appropriate brick lay for the rings on either side. And once I laid it down, it was stuck, and I didn't try to correct it. And like Robert said, it's really tough to see the seam. And so that's a completed vessel.
It's going in the raffle.
You know, it's not going in the giveaway. And look at that pecan. That's just a gorgeous piece of pecan, and it adds so much to that vessel. There's so many things going on in there. And if you look on the inside, you'll see some places where, although I took care to make sure there wasn't any bug holes, by the time I turned away, that, you remember I'm dealing with like a sort of an inch of wood. I exposed, I think, 3 bug holes on the inside. But it's on the inside, not on the outside. When it's finished with wood bowl finish. I think that has 5 coats of wood bowl finish. It's only got maybe 2 on the bottom because I just took it off this week. So there'll be more coats on the bottom. I did not. That's just the way wood bowl finish shines up. Wood bowl finish is extremely hard. It's food safe. If you get a drip, boy, that's a pain because it's so hard to sand that drip away. That I made a bowl for my daughter, and I was all done, and I was just about to take the bottom off, and I noticed that it had not a drip. It had a drip. And I think it took me a day to sand off the excess and reapply it. But
Put it on with a brush?
I put it on with a rag in a box rag, but a special one that I found that doesn't have a lot of lint coming off on it, and I applied it with just a piece of paper.
So you hollow that as you go?
I did a little bit of hollowing, but I saved most of it for the end, and I kind of wished I had done a little bit more hollowing as I went. Ended up using my Jameson rig to do the inside hollowing. And I'm not particularly good at that, and so I won't tell you how many hours I spent with sandpaper cleaning up some of the problems. Yeah, Johnny Tolley says you start with the paper that's called 2 rocks from the parking lot, and they kind of worked down. I think I started with 80 and worked up. And this is resources. And by the way, we'll put the video up on the website, and if you wanted to find things like the resources page or something, you'll find it on our YouTube channel after I get around to doing it. So the idea books were the 2 that were passed around, the Ray Allen book and the Malcolm Tibbetts book, Woodturner Pro and Segment Pro, which we talked about, and then the sled design, which was the secret for me for having success at building the feature rings. And I think that's it. Okay.
What was the turning method and how do you attach it to the lathe?
I had a sacrificial block that was glued on at the bottom. The bottom ring was 3/4 of an inch thick, and then the sacrificial block was almost 2 inches thick. It had a faceplate on the bottom of that. And I used to, and Chris used to, put paper in between the sacrificial block and the rest of the vessel. And if you get a little too wild and crazy, you might end up with your bowl on the floor. So we've gone to just gluing it directly to the sacrificial block, and then having to turn away some of the material.
How many pieces have you blown up after investing a considerable amount of time?
I don't think I've given up on any of them. In terms of, you're talking about a rapid, unplanned disassembly? I've never had a rapid, unplanned disassembly.
He has had one to come off and go on the floor, but it didn't break.
Yeah, but I saved that one.
Yeah, it got a few nicks and scratches, but it was okay.
And I guess one of the reasons for that is I don't do the inch thick wall thickness. I've got too much time invested in these things, and I'd like to see them stay together. So that wall thickness that you see in the vessel going around is sort of typical, maybe a little bit thicker than some of the ones I've done, but I don't get real thin. Part of your question reminded me that I'd learned somewhere along the way, I think maybe it was a Malcolm Tibbetts secret that Chris and I learned. You don't finish your vessel, finish in terms of turning it, and immediately apply finish, because the glue will migrate a little bit, and you'll feel after say a week, you'll feel a little bit of a ridge in between each segment. So we let our vessels marinate a little bit, and then we do a final sand. And then this one's pretty smooth. You don't feel any of those ridges, but you may remember some of those ridges in my early vessels. Chris.
So the other thing that I think you agree with is that be careful not to make too much heat when you're sanding. We kind of think that's what caused some of that glue stuff too. So you got to take it real easy. But I've let some of mine sit for a month before I go back and do a real light final sand.
How to hold it on the lathe when you take the bottom off.
I tell you, I've had one or two where I had problems, and so I always have a catcher who's standing and watching. But let's see, I have a Chucky, what do you call it? Rubber Chucky with a 60-degree cone that's pretty big, and it fits in the mouth of that thing. And that was on the headstock side, so that was giving me the friction for spinning. On the other end, I had a one-way live center that screwed into the faceplate, and now I could spin the vessel between the rubber Chucky and the one-way center, and it centers up beautifully. And then I used a parting tool to part it, and most importantly, I have a steady rest that I put on the declining side of the profile, so that if it starts to leave, it can't leave the rubber Chucky, because the steady rest is kind of holding it in place. And because after I part it off, I want to do some sanding, so I need it to be something I can put tools on the other side. So between the steady rest and the rubber Chucky, I'm holding it in place.
So could you have used your Ron Brown device with the captive ring?
I could, but I don't think I've got bolts that are long enough, and I found that thing is so hard to set up that I haven't been using it much, honestly.
So I know that sometimes you build these from the bottom up and the top down, and you marry them. So what's your decision about making this all together instead of in halves?
I said in the beginning that I had several things that I wanted to learn how to do, and I just decided that I wanted to do it this way. But what he's talking about, if you have a closed vessel, maybe this had a big mouth, and so I could get my hands inside it. But a lot of mine, the top is small enough that I can't get my hands inside. So I can't do any sanding, I can't do any finishing. So I'll put a sacrificial block at the top, a sacrificial block at the bottom. I'll build it up like it was a solid ball, build it up like it was a solid ball. I can turn those. I can use the one way to marry the two pieces together and do any finish cuts that I need to get the outsides to line up, and do a little bit of sanding in that orientation before I glue it, and then I glue it, and usually it moved a little bit, and so I have to do a little bit more work on it, but not a lot. But if you have a narrow top and you're not real good at the Jameson system, building it in two halves is a lifesaver.
We did see some work in a gallery in Colorado, I think it was, a gentleman that turned the segmented vessels, and the walls on those vessels were 1/16 of an inch, maybe, super, super thin. They were just super thin. Didn't weigh anything, felt like balsa wood. Yeah, these were really thin. I don't know about Jim, but wouldn't have the nerve to do that. Not after you spent that much time putting it together.
So I'm all done, and I guess we got a raffle to do. I want to thank you all for coming and for sitting patiently. And if anybody's got any questions about segmenting, I'd love to talk about it. It's become a passion for me. American Woodturners Association website, there's a segmented special interest group on segmented turning, and it's a pretty active group. And you know, if you get an answer from Jerry Bennett and from Malcolm Tibbetts, you're talking to the people that have created the industry, so they're just as nice as they can be. And the shirt came from the Segmented Turners Forum in Chicago this last year, and I got to spend time with Jerry and Malcolm and some of the other turners of note. I think that's a $35 a year group to join.